folks, right, something of a slightly different video this week. I've not had a chance to get out with the camera. The weather's not been great. It's been grey, murky, overcast and not been great light. So rather than going out there and producing something that I don't think would have been worth sharing, I've concentrated on other things. What I thought I'd do this week is go through the editing process that I used on the photographs for last week's video, the ones up at Kentra Bay. So what I've started with is the first shot there is one that I took the day before when the tide was out, and I've basically colour graded it and edited it, and it's quite a nice shot, but there's a lot of messiness in the foreground, a lot of detritus, a lot of rocks and pebbles and that sort of thing, and it's not as pleasing to the eye as what it could be. So I went back, as you'll probably recall, I'll put a link to the video in the top corner if you've not seen that video, and I went back and took a photograph again at high tide, and I did a short exposure photograph with the shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, f11 at ISO 800, and then I did another shot at 25 seconds ISO 100 f11, and that's given us like a really nice smoothed out water effect. It's also given us a nice smooth blend of the sky behind, but as a downside to that, because of the wind, it's given us movement in the tree and also on some of the bracken on the ridge to the left hand side. So what I want to do is combine the two images together and create a image that's sharp on the foliage and the tree itself, but also a nice blended exposure with a nice movement in the sky and the smoothed out water in the foreground. So let's have a go at that. So we'll start off with this one first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into the settings, make sure it's not being cropped. I'm going to go in and I'm going to enable any lens correction. I'm going to remove the chromatic aberration, which I don't think there is any, and then we're going to go in. So let's have a look at the colour profile. I like to use the camera matching profiles. I use the Nikon D750, so I like to use the Nikon colour space, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a neutral colour palette on this one, because I'm going to straight away give me that little bit of leeway in the shadows, elevates the shadows slightly without being too flat. If I go into a flat profile, it's very muted, very flat and lacking in contrast. So I'm just going to go to the neutral. If I was to go into the standard, if I go into the standard profile, that would work as well, but it probably doesn't quite give me the same latitude in the shadow. So I'm going to go for the neutral profile on this one, and I'm not going to do any localized adjustments on this. I'm just going to basically colour grade it to where I want it to be. So I'm just going to lift the shadows up first of all to see what we've got. I've got the histogram displayed in the top corner, so I can see if there's anything clipping. And what I can do is, I'm using the iPad Pro, I think it's the M1 iPad Pro. And the reason I'm using that is that when we get onto the masking part of it, there's going to be a great deal of brushwork, and I like to use the Apple Pencil and the screen. I know you can get the sort of Wacom tablets and that sort of thing. That's just something I don't have, so I like to use the iPad Pro there, so I can actually just have a more tactile feel and brush in the masking where I want it. So whilst you're using the iPad Pro, you can just put your finger on the screen, and as you move and slide, you can just see if there's any clip in there. So with the shadows, I've got a lot of latitude there, there's no shadows going to be clipped, so it's now very much a case of doing it to eye. So I think if I bring the shadows up to there, I'm quite happy with that. Let's have a look at the highlights, if there's any clipping in the highlights. There shouldn't be. So yeah, if I just bring that back down to, about -15 there. The blacks, I always like to elevate the blacks just a slight amount. And the whites again. So if you can see there, as I'm just increasing the whites, it shows you there where the detail's starting to clip away, you're starting to lose that detail. So I could go up to +23, but I'm going to just bring it down ever so slightly to about there, and I'm quite happy with that there. I'll put a little bit of contrast in, and overall I'm quite happy with the exposure on that one. So let's have a look at the colour. and I'm quite happy with the colour. There's no real colour cast. It was taking sort of back end of golden hour, probably after golden hour morning, so it was still quite softly lit. So there's going to be a warm element to the sky ever so slightly. And I don't think there's any sort of green, there might be a little bit of green cast there, so I might just have a look, just increase that ever so slightly. What I'm looking at is the actual, I'm looking at the smoothed out water, it just seems to have a little bit of a green cast, so I'm just going to increase it ever so much, a fraction there, and I'll just put a little bit more vibrance in. Probably a little bit too much there. I'm just going to knock it back a little bit of vibrance, and I'm just going to knock the saturation back. And let's go into the effects panel. And I always put a little bit of texture in there. I think it just seems to be what works best for the actual Nikon camera. For my, it's an old camera. It's probably 14-year-old camera. So these are just the settings I found to actually work and get the best detail for the images that I want. I'm not going to do any DAs at this point, and I'm not going to introduce any grain. Detail wise, let's just have a quick zoom in. How sharp are those rocks? Let's have a quick look. So I'm just zooming in. They're quite sharp as they are, so I'm not going to introduce any sharpening at this point. And I'm certainly not going to crop at this junction. Right, so that's just a very basic quick edit without any localized adjustments. So I'm just going to copy the settings, and then I'm going to go to the image that I'm going to use as my reference image. So look, so this is the image I'm going to use for my sharp details. I'm going to paste the settings, and there we go. So we should have two images side by side that look very similar. So what we're going to do, let's just have a look. They're not perfectly aligned, so I'm just going to have a look and see if there's any cropping on this one. No, so for some reason that's moved slightly out of line. Let's just have a quick look at the focal length. Focal length is 70mm. 70mm there. Let's just double check, make sure that we've got everything where we want it. That's the, for some reason I didn't click the lens correction, so let's just have a quick look. Slight discrepancy, not quite sure why at this point. Must have been that the tripod moved on location. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take these across now. Now these are consistently, all the settings have been transferred across. I'm going to take this across into Photoshop. I'm going to edit in Photoshop. So if you click edit in Photoshop, it takes across the one image that you've been looking at and you've been working on last there on your screen. Comes across as your first layer. So what we need to do is we need to duplicate and add a new layer. And from that we're going to go into the Lightroom photos, and this, if you've got a big catalogue, it can take a while for these to come through. So I'm just scrolling through all the catalogues I've got until I get down to, now they are in alphabetical order, so if you put these in one folder together, you can just look for that folder and find them. So here we go, we're in the Kentra video, and that's the one we're wanting. Right, so we open that one on. So when you create a new layer, it goes to the top of the stack, so the new image is going to sit on top. Okay, so the new image is imported. What I want to do then is straight away I'm going to move the opacity down. Okay, once I've moved the opacity down, I can then look at the image and look to align it where it needs to be aligned. So by dropping that opacity down, the tree and the foliage is never going to be perfect because the wind was blowing and that's what's moved things out of line. That's why we're doing this process. So if you look at things like the tree trunk around there and the actual ridge line of the mountains, those are the things that you need to focus on. So I'm happy with that placement. I'm just going to bring the opacity back up. As I slide that opacity slider, you can see the only thing moving really is the water's edge, the cloud and the top of the trees. So put the opacity back up to 100. Now I'm just going to move the layers around. So what I need to do is on this top layer is I just need to mask that tree out. So I'm going to select the lasso tool. I'm just going to now use the pencil, move one away from the mouse, and I'm just going to go down, follow the tree around as closely as I can to the outline of the tree. Okay, now we're going to refine edge. So once you click refine edge, it's a little bit like doing an air masking when you're doing a portrait or an animal print or anything like that, and you can refine that edge. So what I like is I like to go for a red overlay, and I'm just going to, so now what you can do is I've got my brush set at 40 pixels. I'm just going to brush in this top bit of bracken or ghost, whichever it is there. Same there. We're just going to refine this edge. Use a larger brush here. And just work our way around. And in between the tree branches, it's really doing a great job of just picking out the bits of sky in between. We're just going to decrease that brush size down. We're just going to work on the top of the hedge line there. So that's the mask we've got now. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to invert the selection. That should mask out the sky now. I'm leaving this as the detail that we want. So I then go to output the selection as a new layer with a mask. I'd rather have a new layer than I would have do any of the destructive editing that we might have otherwise. So there's my masks. Now what we need to do now is we're going to work on the bottom layer, and we're going to use the remove tool. So I'm actually going to remove. I'm going to zoom in and let's just get rid of all that tree there. And that should get rid of that tree, leaving the trunk in place. And we're just going to get rid of that as well. That's the remnant of that tree there. And there we have it. It's done quite a good job of removing that tree. Now I noticed a bit of a hard line up there, and I'm using the smudge tool just to blend that sky ever so slightly and get rid of any hard edges. And I think that's done a decent enough job there. Right, so we bring the tree back in, and you can see there that the tree has been masked out, and you've got the blended sky in the background, which is great. So what we need to do on the layer mask, use the brush tool, and we're going to start by getting rid of the textured water for the smoother water that we've got on the image below. So what we'll do is we'll increase the brush size up to probably about there. and we can just do a lot of the heavy lifting straight away. Just need to make sure hardness is okay. Opacity wants to be 100, your hardness can be lower, so you've got a nice feathered edge, and we're just going to go in, not going to go too close to the coat, to the shoreline. We're just getting rid of the bulk of it at this point. So that's basically just initially got us the bulk of it out. Now, what I want to do is go in a little bit closer, use a much smaller brush, and just take it in a little bit closer. Now this is a great way because you can just zoom in and just take your time. And you'll notice as you're looking at this, there is part of the layer missing underneath. That's fine, we're going to do a crop anyway. But what I'm just doing, I'm just gently working in up to the shoreline. Just nice and tidy like that. And as I go around, all the way around, you'll notice it just lines it up in places. And that's fine, that's fine. The water's moved during the course of the exposures. I mean, literally we're talking a few seconds apart. And the tide went out as we were talking, as we were taking the shots. You know, this is nearly half a minute, and in that half a minute the water level had subsided. I'm just gently feathering it in, and just blending it to the layer below. And we're just going along, and I'll speed this process up a little bit. So that's the two exposures blended. Now, what I'm going to do now is we're just going to crop this image. I said earlier that there was parts of the frame on the outside that we weren't quite happy with. So I'm going to go in and crop the image. But what I'm going to do, whilst I've got the chance, I'm going to bring it in from this left hand side. And the reason being is that there's a little rock just there that I want on the left hand side of the frame that I want to just eradicate. Just crop it out slightly. And there we are. So that is the images we've got. So I'm quite happy with how that's come out. I'm just going to have a quick look around the trees. Just going to have a quick look around there. There's just the odd little bit of detail around the fern and the bracken there I'm not quite happy with. So what I'm just going to do, yeah, it's the layer underneath that's just still showing through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close that down, and I'm just going to work on the layer underneath, and we're just going to remove. We're just going to remove this bit up here. I'm going to put a larger brush on, and we're just going to remove this motion blur that we've got in the bracken. Just get that, see if we can get rid of that. Bring the bracken back on, that's looking much better, but I'm just going to get rid of this bit here. And that's looking much better straight away. Let's just have a quick look, make sure there's no more anywhere else. A few little bits around there, so I'm just going to close that off. We're just going to get rid of that bit. Not happy with that, so I'm just going to it does quite a good job on the let's have a quick look. So yeah, that's now giving us a crisp outline there. Just checking on the skyline, a little bit of motion there, so let's just work on this. Get rid of that bit of bracken there. Bring that back on. That looks fine. And yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So what we'll do now is I'm going to send this back across to Lightroom. Now notice I didn't flatten the image on this occasion because there might be the odd chance where I might need to come back into Photoshop if there's something I've overlooked. So I haven't flattened the image at this stage, but it's going to go into Lightroom and we'll work on it there. The reason I put it into Lightroom is that it's a lot easier, I find, to use the selective edits if you wanted to do any details in there, which we're going to do in a moment. Now just looking at it now, let's just have a look. Is there anything that we're unhappy with? There's a few of the little sections in the water that I want to remove. Now, it would have been nice if they'd not been there in the first place, but as I said, the tide was literally going out as we spoke. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. So, what do we want to do now? Well, first of all, we're going to start doing some selective edits. I'm going to bring the exposure up slightly. I'm going to bring it up half a stop. I'm then going to select the sky, which it does, and it selects part of the hills and the tree as well. So a great tool that they brought out probably a couple of years ago is when you make a selective edit or like select sky, you can remove from or subtract from the selection. That's a luminance range. So what I'll do is I'll just go onto the tree. Let's have a zoom in. So by zooming in on sections of the tree, we've removed all the tree and the rocks, and looking at it, the ridge line as well from the selection. So we'll apply that. The other thing I want to do, so we don't have a hard crisp edge that looks obvious, obviously that it's been edited, where the sky meets the mountain range, we're going to subtract from the mask and we're going to use a linear gradient, and we're just going to bring it up just to soften that edge. So I'm just going to soften that edge, just like that. So it is a little bit softer there and less obvious. You can see if you look in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, the black and white representation of where the adjustments are going to affect. So I'm going to drop the sky down half a stop, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to give it a little bit more contrast. I'm just going to bring back the highlights slightly, and I'm just going to bring down the white slightly, and I'm just going to lift the shadow so it's not too stark. And in the effects panel we're going to go into dehaze. I'm just going to dehaze it a fraction, and it's very much a case of less is more. I'm going to go back onto the mouse and leave the pencil, and I'm just going to increase a little bit of texture, and I'm not going to choose a clarity slider on that one. Colour, I'm just going to desaturate it ever so slightly. Now what you can do is you can have a play around, just see what happens if you add some warmth into it, and I think if you add warmth into it, it looks unnatural. So I'm not going to adjust the temperature, and I think that's fine for the sky. I'm going to leave the sky where it is for now. So we're going to make another selective edit. We're going to use linear gradient. I'm going to come in and we're going to start to apply a little bit of a vignette. So just a third of half a stop, and just duplicate it. So if I rotate this round, just darkening the corner so it's naturally leading your eye into the actual frame. Duplicate it again, And this is going to affect the sky, the top corner of the sky. Just going to rotate it around slightly. And you can also just stretch them down slightly, just peel them off if you want to. And what you've got here is that as you're applying each selective edit, they've all got the same values. So whatever edit you made on the first one is affected on the second one. And if you look at the black and white section on the selective edits, it shows you what's been affected. So you've got that natural vignette around that's just helping keep you right in the frame. Now, I'm quite happy with the reflection of the light and the contrast between the light and the foreground and the midground. If I wasn't, I could potentially use a brush and brush in the water there to give a little bit more of a leading line into the frame. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to brush, use a brush selection. So I'm going to go back to the pencil. We're going to zoom in and have a look at the size of the brush. I just want to increase the size of the brush there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to brush these rocks. Now, I'm being careful not to go into the sky. You'll see why in a moment. So, selecting these rocks here in the midground. We're just going to reduce the size of the brush down. Zoom in a little bit more. And we're just going to brush into the tree. We're just going to do the tree trunk as well. Okay, and just going to reduce the size of the brush down a little bit further, and we're just going to do the other branches as they go a little bit higher. We're not going to do every individual branch, we're just going to do the main branches there that you can see. The ones that have got a little bit of highlight on them from the bark. I think this is a silver birch, and it's got a little bit of the silver bark on there, and that's what I'm going to want to bring out there. So that should be enough there on the tree. So at the moment it just looks like a red blob, but what we're going to do is we're going to use that subtract from mask again, and we're going to use the luminance range. And what we're wanting to subtract from the mask is the darker colours, and if you just move the cursor around until you get, I want a lot of these rocks to be quite dark, so there we go. I'm just going to apply it there. We'll apply it there. You can see the pink highlighted on the actual screen as to what's going to be affected, and I'm just going to use the whites. I'm just going to increase the whites. I'll probably up the exposure just a fraction. A little bit more contrast, a bit more of the highlights, and we'll just lift the shadow. So what I wanted to do is I wanted that midsection there, the tree and the rocks around it, to just pop out. I took the frame at f11, so in terms of depth of field and using shallow depth of field to separate the subject from the rest of the landscape, it wasn't really appropriate, and it wasn't practicable. I had to use a 10 stop filter to get the long exposure. If I'd have gone any less than f11, I wouldn't have been able to get the shutter speed I did to smooth out that water. So looking at that, what I can also do is I'm just going to increase a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity, and we're just going to increase the sharpness ever so slightly. So let's just now look into that. And yeah, I'm quite happy with how that's coming out. So that, I think, is his first edit of that one. That's the colour edit. We could, if you wanted to, we could go in and do things, work on the colour mix and make it a little bit more autumnal looking, yellow down the grasses slightly, that sort of thing. But I think as a representation of the scene, that's a very good close representation to how I recall the scene being. So that's the first one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an alternative version. I'm going to use a black and white profile. Now, Lightroom's black and white profiles I find absolutely fantastic for just setting the initial tone of how you want the image to appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at, you've got like the black and white 12, 11, 10, all the way up to 1, and you'll find one that seems to be as you want the image to appear. So it's worth just sliding through, just selecting through these at random. And I think 12's too dark in the shadows. 11's a possibility, but I quite like number 9. Yeah, 11 just makes it a little bit too flatter in the sky area. 10's again a little bit flat in the blacks, so I think we're going to go number 9 because there's a certain level of contrast there in the actual shadows. So we'll use number 9. Now what we can do is there's a slider there, you can adjust it accordingly. So we'll use black and white 9. Now looking at that, if I was starting from scratch, I will probably use the same selective edits to create that natural vignette, and I would certainly use a brush to highlight the rock formation and the tree and get that to pop as well. I think what I am tempted to do with the selective edits is on the sky, I'm just going to darken it down a little bit more. I think the dramatic sky on this occasion, I think it'll stand it, and I think a good way to do that is going to be to increase a little bit more DAs. And we're just going to darken down the shadows slightly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional linear gradient just on the top part of the sky. And again, I'm just going to, it's affecting the top of the tree, but let's just have a look if we can subtract that from the mask. Yeah, we can subtract the top of the tree from the mask, apply that, and we're just going to drop the exposure ever so slightly. And I think what we're going to do is on the vignetting, on the 4 vignette edits, we're going to drop those a little bit more as well. Just drop the highlights back and the whites a little. And on the brush tool, where we've amended those, I'm just going to give it a little bit more. I think in the black and whites, you've just got that little bit more freedom to be a little bit more creative in the process and just accentuate things just that little bit more than you would normally. So I think that's what I'm going to do. That's what I've done on this occasion, and I think that's somewhere near where I want to be. So what I'll do is, if I'm going to share this to social media now, and this is a tool that seems to have just been introduced relatively recently, is that you can just add a border and share. And I don't think that's a bad image to share, and so I'm going to share that. Now that will be quite a low file size, so it's suitable for social media. If I was going to use it for print, I would export it manually at the highest resolution and send it across to the printers to have it printed. And so again, with the colour image, I'm just going to add a border and export it as well. So there we have it, both the images, one colour, one black and white, from 2 frames where the exposures have been blended for the different time durations. I hope that's been informative. Hope it's been worthwhile and worth your time. If you've made it this far into the video and it has been a benefit, then please hit the like button, just so that you keep notified of the rest of my videos. Then don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell. I'm going to wrap it up for now and leave you with those images, but thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.